Night falls like a heavy curtain over the old district, where shadows dance between weathered stone buildings and narrow alleyways. Mark, a night security guard at the abandoned Max Hospital, begins his usual rounds through the dark corridors that still carry whispers of their past. The flickering fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow across the cracked tile floors. Mark's footsteps echo through the empty halls, each sound amplified by the surrounding silence. He's worked here for 3 months now, but tonight feels different. The air is thick with an unfamiliar heaviness that makes his skin crawl. A soft sound catches his attention as he turns the corner toward the old psychiatric ward. It's barely audible, like fingernails gently scratching against wood. Mark pauses, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The sound stops, then comes again, closer this time. The security guard's hand trembles slightly as he reaches for his radio. Static crackles through the speaker, but no voice answers his call. Just white noise, growing louder, more intense, until it becomes a high-pitched whine that makes him wince. The door creaks open at the end of the hallway. Mark's flashlight reveals nothing but an empty room, its walls covered in peeling paint and old water stains. But as he watches, the dark liquid begins seeping from beneath the door, spreading across the floor like spilt ink. His training tells him to investigate, but every instinct screams to run. The liquid continues its slow advance, and in its reflection, Mark sees something that turns his blood to ice. Faces, dozens of them, contorted in silent screams, pressing up against the surface like creatures trapped beneath black ice. The temperature plummets. Mark's breath comes out in visible puffs as he backs away. The scratching sound returns, now from multiple directions, accompanied by whispers in a language he doesn't understand. His flashlight flickers and dies, plunging him into darkness broken only by the pale moonlight filtering through grimy windows. In that dim light, he sees them, dark figures emerging from the walls, their movements jerky and unnatural. They have no faces, just smooth, blank surfaces where features should be. Their long, thin fingers reach toward him, leaving trails in the air like ripples in water. Mark runs. His feet pound against the floor as he sprints through the darkness, past rooms where medical equipment casts twisted shadows, past walls that seem to pulse with a life of their own. The whispers grow louder, becoming a chorus of voices that fill his head with their terrible symphony. He reaches the security office, slamming the door behind him. But the door provides no barrier. The shadows seep through every crack, every seam. The computer monitors flicker to life independently, each screen showing the same image: a patient's room, empty except for a single chair. As Mark watches in horror, a figure slowly turns its head toward the camera. The whispers suddenly stop. Mark hears a single voice, clear as crystal, in the deafening silence that follows, right behind him. "You don't belong here." He feels cold breath on his neck, smelling of decay and forgotten things. The security cameras catch only static that night. When the morning shift arrives, they find the security office empty, Mark's flashlight on the floor, still warm to the touch. The only other trace is a single handprint on the window, pressed into the glass from the inside, as if someone had desperately tried to escape. The hospital remains standing, its dark windows watching over the city like hollow eyes. And on quiet nights, when the wind blows just right, people passing by say they can hear scratching sounds from within its walls, and whispers in a language no living soul understands. Some say Mark was never found. Others claim to have seen him walking the hospital corridors at night, his eyes now as empty as the faceless figures that claimed him. But no one stays long enough to verify these stories. After all, at Max Hospital, the night belongs to those who dwell in darkness and are always hungry for new company. The wind howled through the mountain pass as Sarah Mitchell rechecked her fuel gauge. The needle hovered just above empty, and the nearest town was still 20 miles away. The snowstorm that had caught her on this remote Wyoming highway wasn't supposed to hit until tomorrow. At 11:30 p.m., she could barely see 10 feet ahead of her headlights. She wasn't the only one who'd made a terrible miscalculation that night. Just 2 miles ahead, James Cooper was already walking. His truck had spun out 30 minutes earlier, sliding into a snowbank. The temperature had dropped to 15 below zero, and his winter coat wasn't enough protection against the brutal wind. Each step became more complex as the snow climbed past his knees. Sarah and James were about to learn why the locals called this stretch of highway Winter's Grave. The storm intensified. Sarah's car sputtered once, twice, and then died ultimately. The silence that followed was deafening. Her cell phone showed no service, and the light from her screen illuminated the swirling snow outside her windows. She knew the statistics. In temperatures this low, a person could freeze to death in under an hour. James had lost feeling in his feet. He'd been walking for what felt like hours, though his watch told him it had only been 45 minutes. The wind cut through his jeans like razor blades, and his face was numb. That's when he saw it, a faint glow in the distance. He tried to run, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Sarah had started to doze off when something hit her window. She jolted awake to see a hand pressing against the glass. A face appeared, half frozen and desperate. She screamed, then realized it was another person, someone as trapped as she was. She quickly unlocked the door. James practically fell into her car. His lips were blue, and ice had formed on his eyebrows. Sarah pulled emergency blankets from her trunk, and they huddled together in the back seat, sharing what little warmth they had left. The car's interior temperature was dropping rapidly, but the absolute horror was yet to come. As they waited, hoping for rescue, the snow outside began to glow. At first, they thought it was headlights, salvation at last. But the light was wrong. It was blue-white, and it seemed to pulse from within the snow itself. And it was moving closer to the car. Through the frost-covered windows, they watched as the light took shape. It looked almost human, but too tall, too thin. It moved like smoke through the storm, leaving no footprints in the snow. Sarah and James held their breath as it passed by the car, mere inches from the window. The temperature inside dropped so low that their breath turned to ice crystals. Hours passed like days. They took turns staying awake, knowing that sleep could mean death. The entity appeared and disappeared throughout the night, each time closer to the car. By dawn, they were both shaking uncontrollably, their bodies on the edge of shutting down. The sun finally broke through the clouds at 7:23 a.m. A snowplow found them an hour later, both barely conscious but alive. Their rescuers would later tell them they were lucky. 3 other people had died on that same stretch of road that night. Their bodies were found frozen solid, each with a peaceful expression, as if they'd decided to lie down in the snow and rest. Sarah and James never drove that road again. But when the wind howls just right on cold winter nights, they both see that blue-white glow in their dreams. And they wonder about those who weren't so lucky, who answered when the light beckoned them out into the storm.